There are many strange and eccentric people in this world. And if they're not appearing on a Netflix documentary or appearing on the Joe Rogan show, they are usually writing books. And I don't know what it is about these weird esoteric books, but they are like catnip to me. Whenever I see one, the weirder it is, the more I have to own it. Now, to be clear, I'm not a conspiracy theorist. I am a rather skeptically minded person, but there's something about the people who write them that I find so interesting. Like, if you've ever watched Louis Theroux, you'll get that idea of how Louis, he doesn't buy into the content of what these people are saying, but he very much is interested in what they have to say and the people who say them and what makes them tick. My name is Ross. I am a book collector, I am a bookseller, and I'm an aspiring author. And today I'd like to take you through the top 10 weirdest books that I have spent my hard-earned cash on. Yes, I spent actual money on all of these books. Kicking us off, we have Did Spacemen Colonize the Earth by Robin Collins. One of the reasons I love this book is because it falls so foul of Betteridge's Law of Headlines, which if you've never heard of that, it's the idea that if a headline is posed as a question, the answer is no. Laura's going to help me with this. I'm going to read some of the stuff in the back. Did Earthman's ancestors travel 26 light years from Lyra?
No.
Did a giant spaceship abduct a British regiment in 1915?
No.
Have Atlantean mammoth and mastodon bones been discovered?
Probably not.
I like that they're combining Atlantis with mammoths. That's a new one. From a scientific point of view, it's pretty clear the fossil record shows that spacemen did not colonize the Earth. But the idea itself is quite interesting. It is explored quite a lot in science fiction. You have, for instance, Ursula Le Guin's Hainish cycle, where essentially there is this, original planet where humans were made, and that they then went and colonized other planets. I'm going to say it's explored much better in science fiction than it is in this book. Not to say I've read all of it. There is certainly some very interesting, weird stuff in it. Coming on to book number 2, this is Gateway to Oblivion by Hugh Cochrane. This is one of many books that I own about the Bermuda Triangle phenomenon, except this one is not related to the Bermuda Triangle itself. It's related to a different triangle, or another shape. All shapes. There's no reason why it has to be triangles. It can be any shape. But the idea is he thinks there are 14 zones around the globe where things go missing. There's again, this one talked about Atlantis. This one also talks about Atlantis. There's something about Atlantis that these people go mad for. Was Atlantis real? Will it ever be discovered? I mean, maybe there was some historical place, like maybe there's a memory of the Minoans or even of like the, Doggerland being sunk. But is there going to be an ancient Greek city with lots of marble statues and everything discovered under the sea? And is it going to be in Bermuda, or in this case, is it going to be near the Great Lakes? I don't think so. But all the same, great read. You
haven't read it.
No, I haven't read it. I haven't read any of these books, to be honest. I've read bits of them. This next book is the only book that I kind of think is fairly sound in this list, mainly because it is not trying to posit some weird idea. This is Flying Saucers by Carl Jung. Carl Jung being the famous psychologist who, in this book, explores the psychological phenomenon behind UFOs. What causes people to believe that what they are seeing is, an alien in the sky, or even just what causes people to see these things, and the kind of folk story element around it. I mean, in many ways, it is the ultimate modern folk story, UFOs, and now it's in Congress, so fantastic. So there you go, Flying Saucers by Carl Jung.
Have you read it?
No. Loosely related to the topic of Congress and aliens is other conspiracy theories involving the deep state. This one here is Who Killed John Lennon by Fenton Bressler. And in this book, he puts forward a very interesting theory, which is that, yes, Mark David Chapman did kill John Lennon, but that he did it under psychic control or psychological influence by the CIA in the MK Ultra program. I mean, that really does tick every box, doesn't it? Fascinating stuff. Do I agree? No, I don't agree. I think that his idea that Mark David Chapman was no more of a fan or no more psychotic a fan than other Beatles fans of the era, I think that's a flawed argument. But, once again, an interesting book. The next book on this list I bought without knowing anything about it. It just looked interesting. And this is Cairo's Book of Numbers. To give you a flavour of what this is all about, it's about numerology. The idea that by changing... The idea that there is an association between the... it's all about... What is it all about? And it's full of these really interesting diagrams. I mean, if you're not sure about where you should live to have the best chance in life and to have the best outcomes, then you should read chapter 29, which is titled How to Know What City, Town or Place is Fortunate for One to Live in. Manchester there has a very favourable numerology. And that is if you're born on the 1st. If you weren't born on the 1st, then you should not live in Manchester. So Laura should live in Manchester.
What if you moved to Manchester with me as someone who was born on the 1st?
It's generally bad luck to move to Manchester. Just to clarify, if you're from Manchester, well done. You're really brave. I'm proud of you. Speaking of people who come from Manchester, this one is a book by Tony Doc Shields, who hails from Salford. Actually, now he lives in Ireland, but for a brief period of time, the period of time over which he wrote this book and over various important things happened in his life, he lived in Cornwall. Tony Doc Shields is a rather interesting character. So he is a magician. He is an artist. In fact, he was in the Penwith Society of Artists that Barbara Hepworth was part of. Not at the same time, but most of all, he is a showman. His whole thing during the 70s and 80s was about putting on a bit of a show. One of Doc Shields' most famous activities was in the art of monster summoning, essentially trying to summon big nautical creatures, and the way he did this was by having a nude coven of witches performing these rituals with him. He claimed to have seen this Nessie-like creature called Morgower off the coast of Falmouth, and even managed to get Tim Dinsdale, who is also slightly eccentric but genuinely believed that the Lochness Monster existed. He managed to get him involved in this search, and I kind of feel a bit bad for Tim Dinsdale. You know, he searched so hard for the Loch Ness Monster and he believed in it so sincerely, and here, you know, this weird guy down in Cornwall manages to convince him that he has seen something similar, and of course he's going to go and search for it, and of course he's going to try and help out. Anyway, he's a very interesting man. Just maybe take his claims with a pinch of salt. Speaking of interesting men whose claims you should take with a pinch of salt, The Prophecies of Nostradamus is the next book on my list, and I am very specifically putting my finger in a certain place because underneath is a very nasty man with a funny moustache.
Who was Nostradamus, please?
Who was Nostradamus? So Nostradamus was this supposed prophet who made essentially all these predictions about the future, or so people like to say. The commentator on this book, Erica Cheetham, she goes through a lot of these predictions and manages to retrofit a lot to the last 500 years of history, mostly weirdly involving obscure events in the reigns of European kings, but also makes some predictions for the future. I mean, on the front of here, it says a third world war is predicted. Now, that still hasn't happened, and this book was originally published in 1974. But as an encyclopedia of Nostradamus' predictions and an encyclopedia of some strange interpretations of his predictions, I think it's a pretty good book. We're about to get the big guns out. This book here, it's called The Knights Templars. Now, there have been lots and lots of conspiracy angles to the Knights Templars over the years. This one I particularly admire because this book is actually published by the Masonic Lodge here, and the person who owned it clearly didn't like the Masonry angle much at all because they've crossed out the logo, and I just love that provenance. That's fantastic. The author takes two angles in this book. One of them is covering the persecution of the Knights Templars, and the other angle is looking at similarities between the ritual aspects of the Knights Templars and the ritual aspects of the Masons, Freemasons. And his conclusion on the latter is that Freemason rituals don't stem from the Templars, but that there is essentially some kind of Q gospel, like some original source that they both stem from. I am not an expert in this. I could not tell you in any degree whether that's true or not. I just like owning this book. I like owning Freemason stuff. I probably shouldn't admit that. This one is a very interesting little book. Now, the most famous conspiracy name on this list is probably going to be Graham Hancock, who has written many books, but this one here is The Sign and the Seal, rendered beautifully in red Times New Roman bold. And this book is all about the Ark of the Covenant and his search to try to find it. Now, did he find the Ark of the Covenant? Well, you're just going to have to read it to find... No, he didn't. He didn't find the Ark of the Covenant, but he believes that it is the Ethiopian church who are in possession of the Ark of the Covenant. This book goes round the houses of conspiracy theories. It talks about the Holy Grail, which he believes is one and the same with the Ark of the Covenant. It talks about Prester John, you know, that old king of the East that people believed existed and then turned out to just be Genghis Khan. He also even touches on the Templars, which we've just visited. There are so many pit stops on this tour, and it is a chunky book, and I have not read it, but boy do I love owning it. We're finally there. This is the last book on my list, and let me tell you, there are many, many more books that I could have included in this list, but I respect your time. And the significant part of this book is this is one of the few conspiracy theories that I actually believed. This is The Bible Code by Michael Drosnin. The idea behind this book is that if you take all of the characters, as in the glyphs of the Torah, the Hebrew glyphs, and if you arrange these glyphs into what is essentially like a word search pattern, you can find words that intersect and essentially recount events in history that were written after the time and also predict the future. Michael Drosnin, he didn't invent this idea. It was actually part of Hebraic tradition of the last century, this idea that you can use these patterns within the Torah to kind of make a stronger claim for the veracity of the work. At the time when I first heard of this idea, I was, embedded in the evangelical church. I watched a documentary and, I was totally ripe for believing that that this was a real thing. Was I convinced for long? I think after a while I kind of realized that if this was true, why? Why would the assassination of Yitzhak Rabin, for instance, why would that be hidden in the Torah? It didn't make any sense. Now, as I say, Michael Drosnin went one step further, and he actually wrote 3 of these. And in the second book, he even posited the idea that this ancient code was inserted by extraterrestrials, and that the key to unlocking it would be found somewhere near the Dead Sea in an obelisk. So really, if I'd heard about that from the start, then maybe I wouldn't have bought in so heavily. But of all of the weird conspiracy books that I own, I guess this is the one that has the most significance for me, the most kind of relevance to my journey to where I'm at now, and for me, the most interesting of them all. So there you have it. There are the 10 weirdest books I own. There were many more books that could have made this list, but I had to end somewhere. Do you own any weird books? Why don't you share them in the comments? I'd love to see what weird books you own and whether you read any of these.
Like and subscribe. It does us all a huge favour.
Really helps us out. All right, cheers, bye.